Can you add value? Can you find clients? And if you have a product that nobody understands, that nobody wants to buy, you got nothing. Yeah. Also, if it's something that you enjoy doing and nobody wants to buy it, it's just a hobby, and it's an expensive hobby. Business it's pretty simple. You have something that somebody else wants, and you're able to sell it to that person for an exchange of something. Yeah. Right. And if you don't have that, you're just messing around, you're wasting time.
Welcome to the Warrior Rising podcast. I'm your host, Benjamin Bunn. I'm here with the executive director, the man who started it all, Jason Van Camp. We're going to have a great conversation today, not only about his veteran experience, but about his transition and about how he started, the organization that, of course, birthed this podcast, the Warrior Rising podcast. But going to hear about his journey and how he started the premier veteran nonprofit specializing in helping transitioning veterans start their own businesses. And of course, as you know, Warrior Rising doesn't just help veterans. We also help, in some cases, their family members. If you're interested in participating in our programs, you, of course, can go to warriorrising.org so that you can sign up for the Warrior Academy. We have continued opportunities for self-paced educational modules, both coaching calls and master classes throughout the week. And then, of course, for those that are able to participate through all of our programs, you'll have the opportunity to participate in our national business showers. We usually have 3 to 4 per year. We're here right now at the Riverside Casino in Iowa for the first business shower of the year, our Iowa business shower in the Twin City area. Really excited for it. Excited to be here with Jason Van Camp. Can't wait to dig in and learn more about his journey and how he started this thing that we've all come to know and love. Jason, how are you doing today?
Hey man, thanks for having me on the show. We finally did it. We got the podcast up, and nobody better than you to host it. So thanks for doing this.
I appreciate you saying so. My biggest goal in starting this podcast with you is one, try not to say anything offensive if I can avoid it. I don't want to get us canceled, for gosh sakes.
That's a good one to have.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then of course, I just think it's so interesting to have an opportunity to tell veteran stories. There's a lot of great veteran entrepreneurs out there, right? Like these guys that have incredible reach and incredible stories. David Goggins, Jocko Willink, all of which I'm sure are going to be clawing at the opportunity to be on this podcast, to be interviewed by me. I believe I've already gotten emails from them. It might have been junk mail, I'm not sure. But that being the case, I think it's going to be a cool opportunity for us to tell some of these unsung stories, like people who don't always have the opportunity. I don't have a book. Maybe I'm just somebody that's starting a lifestyle business in my hometown and affecting my local community, but I think it's a great story, and I think people are going to get an opportunity to tell their stories on a platform and get the word out, and I think they wouldn't normally have that chance, so I think this is a great opportunity to do that. But that being said, though, people want to know about you, right? And I think this is an interesting opportunity for people to get to know our executive director. You've got a storied background in the military, specifically special operations, played ball at the United States Military Academy. You just have so much cool stuff going on. What I'd love to do is I'd love to start with how your military career started. You of course, are a USMA grad. Tell us, how did you find yourself going to West Point? How did you make that decision? And tell us about kind of those early days for you.
Yeah, so I grew up in Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C., and my dad, he worked at the AMC building, and before that, he worked at the Pentagon for a long time as a civilian contractor, and my mother worked for Delta Airlines, and in that area, growing up, everybody's affiliated with the military in some way. Yeah. You go growing up in elementary school, it's like, what did your dad do? What does your mom do? The answer for a lot of them is, in the military or I don't know, because they work at the Pentagon or someplace else. They don't really know, but that's sort of where I grew up in the area. And so it was sort of instilled in you to be patriotic. And I was born in 1977, so I grew up in the 1980s, right? And there were two enemies, right? In the Washington, D.C. area. There were the Russians, and then there were also the Dallas Cowboys. Not necessarily in that order.
Yeah.
Right? So we hated those two things, right? And I never thought to myself, oh, I'm going into the military. My grandfather served in the Army Air Corps in World War II.
Yeah.
but I never really thought about what I would do. I just sort of kept my eyes 25-meter target, so to speak. Like, what's the next step?
Yeah.
And I was really good at sports, and my parents really pushed me to do sports, and I played everything. And I was particularly good at football, and I got an opportunity to go to West Point to play football.
Yeah.
And when I was a junior in high school, I started to get mail and Florida State and Texas and Virginia, and I was like, man, I'm going to go big time college football. And then the recruiters came to my high school when I was a senior, like, oh man, you're 6 foot tall, you're 200 pounds, man. Like, you're not going to play for us, And so I was really disappointed.
I want to be clear, being 6 foot tall and being 200 pounds when you're in high school is indeed like having superpowers. Like we've talked about this. Like being a 6 foot tall, 200-pound man with a full head of hair is like having gosh dang superpowers. I hate it for the short kings out there who are like 5'6" and balding, but it's like, you're more likely to get a traffic ticket than I am. You know what I mean? So it's like, but it's funny that they level set with you and like, hey brother, you need to be like 6'4", 300 pounds if you want to make it.
Yeah, that's sort of how it went down. And some of the Division I AA schools and Army and Navy, they were really after me hard. And we went on a visit to West Point, and my parents were like, "You're going here. You can't say no to this." And my recruiter came to my house, and it was a little bit later in the recruiting season, and he was like, "Jason, we got to know. You got to make a decision right now. Are you coming here or not?" I looked at my parents, and they were just like, "You better say yes."
How old were you at the time?
I was 18.
So you were like barely old enough to smoke cigarettes.
I was actually probably 17. Yeah, 17.
Not even old enough to vote or smoke cigarettes. Right. And you made a decision to go to West Point.
Yeah, I had no idea how big of a decision that was for me at the time.
I was going to ask, did you realize how impactful that decision was going to be?
I was just like, I need to pick somewhere to go.
What a crossroad that was.
Gosh, man. So when my kids, my daughter and my son get to that point in their life, I'm not going to make it so that it's a small decision. I'm going to help them to understand this is a huge decision. What you're going to do moving forward, and try to be with them to understand how big of a decision and what they should do in the future. For me, it was just like, I guess let's do it. You know what I mean?
That's wild. It's wild because truly, that was probably like the biggest crossroad in your entire life.
No doubt.
17 years old.
Yeah, at that point, yeah, for sure.
Just like in your dining room, talking to a recruiter or something crazy.
Yeah.
That's wild. Well, I think you made the right decision. It seems to be the case.
Well, who knows where my life would have taken me if I didn't say yes in that moment. I don't know.
So you say yes, and you finish up your senior year, and you head off to West Point. Tell me about that experience. What was it like to play ball at West Point?
Shoot, man. So they have a sign. They have tons of signs in the locker room, right?
Yeah.
Motivational signs and sayings and things like that. And one of them was sort of unique. It was National Champions of Toughness, right? And it was a sign right above the door, and we always hit that sign before we ran out the door into the game and all that.
Yeah.
And when you first see it, you're like, man, are we resigning ourselves to the fact that we'll never be national champions? We'll never compete for a championship.
Yeah.
And so the best we can do is to be a national champion of toughness. And it seems so disheartening and lame to think about like that. One of the senior captains during a meeting, he brought this up, and he's like, guys, when I first saw it, I thought it was one of the worst motivational sayings I've ever seen. But as I've progressed through the West Point experience, I realize how much it means to me and to us, and how true it is.
Yeah.
Like, we do things that other college football teams and other college football players do not.
Oh, couldn't dream of, right?
We get up earlier. We work harder. We've got all this stuff on our plate. And when you leave, you can truly say, I am a tough mother effer, man.
Yeah.
You can take the losses, you can take whatever, but I'm tough. And I can get through hard things. And so when I first got there, you realize pretty quickly that your recruiter, the college coach that came to your house and told you all these things, he was lying to you.
Lied to you a little bit.
Just lied to your face, Yeah.
Well, hey, listen, if it makes you feel any better, mine lied to me a little bit too.
That's all about life, man. It's learning.
Yeah.
When you're young and you're like, oh, I just got straight up lied to. It wasn't even an exaggeration. It was just like lied to. I remember going on a visit. You're like, hey, what are these kids doing? Don't worry about them. Don't worry about them. You're not going to have to worry about that. Well, first day, yeah, you're worrying about that pretty hard. You know, when you got formation and you get yelled at and
I
all
can
this
tell
stuff.
you those things are worrisome.
You know? Yeah, man. So I got there just a couple weeks after I graduated from high school.
Yeah.
So there was no like summer break or that whole thing. And you know, you're learning how to march on your first day. And your 4 responses, yes sir, no sir, no excuse, sir, I do not understand. You got to say those 4 things and only those 4 things for the first, you know, few months and everything. And you know, you're running in formation, bro. You're like losing weight. You're like, man, I got to keep my weight on. I can't lose weight for football. And, you know, then the only time you got with football is you got bussed up to the stadium to work out in the gym a little bit.
Yeah.
And you just crush your balls there, you know, which is fine, which is great.
Yeah.
And then the season starts right away. 2-a-days in August, 2-a-days plus West, you know, all the
plus just
stuff.
all the other terrible stuff. Well, I don't want to say terrible stuff, but all the other formative experiences that are taking place at the United States Military Academy that help shape them to become, you know, young officers in the military. You're enduring that plus 2-a-days for the upcoming football season.
Yeah. And, you know, when you're 18 years old and you've never been away from home like this before in your life, your parents, your mom cooks for you, does your laundry or whatever and all that stuff. You're like, man, this is real life. And it just hit me really hard.
Yeah.
You know, so you're kind of doing all that. And also, you know, school starts in late August. And so I remember walking into my first class. It was a math class. It was called Discrete Dynamical Systems. And I walked in there, and the West Point method of teaching is called the Thayer method. And so what that means is you take the test first, and then the teacher, the instructor, the professor teaches you the material, right? So that's how they do it there, right? So you walk into class, and first thing is, all right, get out your calculators, like let's take the test, and then they'll teach you. And I remember walking in, and they handed out the calculators, and it was that new Hewlett-Packard calculator.
Yeah.
It looks like a chalk block, a brick, you know?
Yeah.
And I remember looking at it, like trying to figure out how to turn this thing on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was like, bro, this is going to be a rough 4 years if this is the first day.
Yeah.
And you start to panic a little bit, and you look up, and then you see just a few other kids, you know, fellow classmates, plebes, freshmen, you know, and they all kind of look at each other, and we're looking at each other like, oh shoot, like this is, bro, what are we going to do? You know, so you kind of learn pretty quickly how to be resourceful, how to figure things out, what's important, what's not, what to focus on, what is just fluff that you can get rid of. So it was a hard 4 years, and you kind of learn as you go, and you get tougher, obviously. And when I was a freshman, we beat Navy, which was a great deal.
For real?
We're 5-1.
Hell yeah.
You know, we played Notre Dame at the Meadowlands. We almost won, man. We lost by 1 point, 28-27 to Notre Dame, Fighting Irish.
You think about it a lot?
Not really, because I was just on the sidelines. I had barely played when I was a freshman.
Yeah.
In my sophomore year, we were 10-2. Went to a bowl game. It was our best season ever.
Nice.
And then I left for 2 years to go on a mission for my church to Russia.
Yeah.
And then I came back, and the last 2 years were rough. My junior year, I think we were like 3-8. My senior year, we were like 1-10, man. So the last 2 years were tough ones.
Yeah. You know, I know, you know, I was kind of joking around. And when I say I was joking around, I was talking with somebody who was educated about sports. Not everybody knows this, for those of us that are tuning in and listening, but I don't know anything about ball sports. And it's like, I get a hard time about it constantly from friends, family members. But I do know this. I was talking to a couple of good friends of mine, and I was also talking to Lucas, who kind of helps put the podcast together for us. And we were kind of joking around that, like, you know, this day and age, you could take like one defensive end or wide receiver from like the SEC and drop him in the middle of the Army-Navy game, and that guy would just absolutely just start running through people. You know what I mean? But I think it's probably important. Right. Yeah, right. But it's so important to understand, you know, from to have the perspective of everything else that those young men and women are going through in order not just to participate in that school, but also, you know, playing you know, D1A sports, you know, playing collegiate sports at that level. It's pretty impressive. And, you know, you and I have both had the opportunity to go to Army-Navy games with Warrior Rising, and it's always such a amazing experience. And of course, Army has come through with some wins for us, which has been awesome to see. I think like they went into overtime for the first time in like 112 years. I was like, or somebody 102 years, something bananas like that. And I was like looking around, I was like, football has been around for more than 100 years. You know what I mean? And like my friends were next to me, like, shh, don't say anything next to, you're standing next to an NFL player. They're going to be insulted. But yeah, it's cool to see that history, and it's been fantastic to be able to see cadets, not just from West Point, but also from Annapolis and everything that they're sacrificing, and to see people play sports. That just must have been a really formative experience for you. You know what I mean? I'm sure that's something you're going to be able to carry with you for the rest of your life.
Oh, no doubt. I go back to things that I do now that are seemingly hard. You go through Ranger School or the Q course or even combat, and there were times when they were dark, hard times.
Yeah.
And I would think to myself, man, how am I going to get through this? What can I do? And I used to think to myself, seriously, man, at least I'm not at West Point. You know what I mean? Like, because it was that hard for me. And some people think, it was the best 4 years of my life and it was a piece of cake. It was easy. For me at the time, just being young and immature and having never experienced anything like that before, it was hard. It was very hard.
I've known a lot of West Point graduates, and none of them said it was the best time of their life. I can tell you that right now. They all really, they look back on that experience, and you can tell that, there's a lot of like heartfelt emotion about understanding that it was a valuable experience. But like nobody's talking that shit about it being the best time of their life. I can tell you that right now.
Wait till you go to an alumni dinner, with the 80-year-old guys that get up behind the podium and they're like, well, West Point was the greatest 4 years of my life.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, not for me, man.
I know.
But continue, please.
Yeah. Hey, listen, I tell people if I've had about 2 or 3 old fashions, I tell people the initial invasion to Iraq was the best time of my life. My brother in Christ, I can tell you, it was a bad time. So, tell me about what was life like after West Point. You had a formative experience, at the military academy, and now you're getting spit out into the Army, which is so strange because that 4 years is just the beginning. It's like after that, now you got to go be in the damn Army.
It's like starting over again.
Yeah.
We had to go to the basic course, and so a lot of the Army football players at the time, at least, they would branch field artillery, and so I was thinking to myself, what should I do? What branch should I go? And ultimately, I went the field artillery route. So I found myself at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, pretty quickly after I graduated from West Point. The good thing is you're going there with 100 other West Point graduates that pretty intimately, some of which are some of your best friends. You know? And so we go out there, and I think there weren't too many of us that took it seriously. We're just like, let's get through the course and let's have fun and let's enjoy ourselves. And so we did that. And during the field artillery officer basic course, there was an opportunity to go try out for Ranger School. And so it was for volunteers, and one of the field artillery rangers came and they spoke to everybody like, hey, this is tough. And for whatever reason, artillery officers, when they go to Ranger School, they don't stay. There's a high attrition rate, and, and so we want to make sure that the guys that we do send will graduate, So if you think you're tough, if you want to show up, we'll be at this PT field tomorrow morning at like 4:30.
Yeah.
And they left, and we continued on the rest of the day. And I thought to myself, whatever, I wasn't really interested,
Yeah.
And one of my best friends, he was fired up, man. He was like, oh man, this is awesome. I'm going to do it. I'm like, you're going to do it? He's like, yeah, man, I'm going to do it. I'm like, are you serious? He's like, yeah. I'm like, shoot, man. Well, then if you're doing it, I got to do it too.
Yeah.
I can't let you do it, and I'm not, So I show up at the PT field at 4:30, and there's like 100 guys there. There's a good amount of people there. And my buddy Andy was the one that fired me up to go, and he was super excited to go. So of those 100 guys that were there, one of the only guys that wasn't there was Andy, right?
No.
Yeah. So I'm there looking around like, this son of
looking for the homie. He was sleeping in.
know?
He was bundled up in his whoopee.
And I was like, well, I'm here. I'm not going to quit, know? And so they just crush us the first day. I mean, just soul sucking, darkness. And we finish up. It was about 2.5 hours. And Andy was back at the barracks, right?
Yeah.
And I go back, pound on his door. He opens up, in his boxers, no t-shirt, crumbs in his chest hair, wiping sleep from his eyes. I'm like, bro. And he's like, oh man, like 4:30 was just way too early, man. It just came too early. I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it. And I just looked at him. I was like, Okay. And he shut the door, and I was like, well, I guess I'm stuck doing this for the next 5, 6 months, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's what I did for 6 months, just about, is I got up every day except for the weekends and went and did this Ranger PT. And we went from 100 guys down to 12 guys at the very end.
Yeah.
And 9 of us elected to go to Ranger school. And of those 9, 3 of us graduated. So that was sort of right after West Point. That's kind of what we did is that. And the other thing is, on September 11th that year at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, that's when 9/11, occurred in New York and Washington, D.C. And so that was a transition where we were an army, a military that was essentially training,
Yeah.
and you would get your report based on your PT score, more or
Yeah.
less. Now we're going to war,
Yep.
right? And we're being trained by people who have never been to war.
Never been to war.
You know what I mean? So there was a huge shift in my experience in my career, up to that point.
Yeah. So, and I had good friends, good friends and mentors that were at West Point when September 11th happened. And, I think, and I was in uniform already at that time. I joined when I was 17. I joined in 2000. And so I saw the towers fall and I was in uniform, and I remember thinking to myself, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to war.
Yeah.
And I had not joined with that specific intent, but, I'm sure, myself, like most Americans, I was completely incensed by what had happened. And, although I might have had some hesitation about going to war prior to that point, after that, there was no question in my mind. I was like, I'm about this action. You know what I mean? I was like, like 5,000 people just died, you know what I mean? For nothing. Right. So you finish up, Bullet for field artillery, right? You go off to Ranger school.
Yeah. Ranger school. And I was lucky enough to go straight through True
Yeah.
Blue all the way. I started in January.
Nice. Oh my
in the
God,
winter
you started.
class.
Oh my God, you
Yeah.
started in January.
Finished up in March, like 17th or whenever it was.
God, it was just cold the entire time for you. Bad time,
Yeah.
I'm sure.
But I like the cold, man. I think I do better in the cold than the heat.
God, not me. I'm a mess in the cold, man. I can't think straight. I'm having a bad time. I don't want to get out of my fart sack. None of that, dude. It's some bad stuff. I mean, outside right now, it's snowing. I'm like, ugh, brother, gross. So you get done with Ranger school, you get to your gaining unit. Tell me what happens once you get to your first unit.
So I went to Korea for my first duty station.
Nice.
And I loved every second of it. It was awesome. And so I walk into the battalion commander's office, and I'm in the lobby, and you're supposed to show up and interview, and battalion commander decides where he's going to send you or whatever. And, you're there with your I Love Me book, and you're nervous, and you want to make a good impression. And one of the field artillery first sergeants came walking through, and he had a Ranger tab on.
Yeah.
And he kind of walked by me, stopped. He looked at me. He did the handshake, tab check sort of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. When they kind of look off to the side.
Yeah. And he's like, "Where are you going?" He's like, I'm going to find out right now, First Sergeant. And he's like, "Hold on." And he left. He went back, and he went to the battalion commander's office, came back out. He said, "Don't worry about the interview. You're coming with me."
Nice.
And so
he just brought you with him.
Brought me with him.
I love that.
And I was like, "Okay, cool. Where are we going?" And we went up to basically the DMZ, the 506, so like the Currahys, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, "Oh, great unit," and Alpha Company, and I was attached to an infantry unit as a field support officer, an FSO, and I was on a one company base called Camp Giant in Moonsun. So we're the only ones there.
Yeah.
And our battalion was stationed at, Camp Greaves, I believe it was called. It was right on the DMZ.
Yeah.
And so you could see the North Korean flag with binoculars from my barracks. Like we could see where we were.
That's wild.
Yeah. So it was an awesome time.
Yeah. And then during this time, so obviously the global war on terror had kicked off. We invaded Afghanistan. Then of course ended up invading Iraq as well. Did you find yourself on any deployments early on as a junior officer?
So what happened was during Korea, get an phenomenal opportunity to learn your craft,
Yeah.
To go train in the field, but also on the weekends, you could take off and go explore Korea or Asia.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can just go wherever you wanted to. So it was a unbelievable experience. The global war on terrorism kicked off, and then the initial invasion of Iraq shortly kicked off, and I was sent from Korea to Fort Campbell.
Okay.
To join the 101st.
Nice.
And I got there in time for the initial invasion. So My unit, 3187, the Rakkasans, we went all the way from Korea, the entire length of the country of Iraq, and we ended up going past Mosul,
Yeah.
and we ended up in a little town on the Syrian border called Rabia.
Oh yeah, I'm familiar with Rabia.
And so we were the first to get there, and so we locked the city down, and we manned the border, and we lived in a grain silo. I'm not sure if you remember that grain silo there, but we lived there for a while, and then we set up the first commerce train, free train, sort of thing, and rebuilt some police stations and all that. There wasn't a whole lot of terrorism going on at the time, but that's how it went down.
It's interesting to explain the initial invasion to Iraq to people, because it's essentially like we destroyed their entire infrastructure, and it was less like, I try and tell people all the time, it's not like I was like in just an open gunfight 24/7.
Yeah.
It was like most of the time I'm just kind of like sitting around hungry and tired, and it would be punctuated by like, sometimes violence and gruesome stuff that would happen every now and again. But honestly, after the initial invasion, it was just like dealing with the calamitous act of having seen an entire nation topple, its infrastructure destroyed.
Yeah.
It's just Mad Max. So it's like Mad Max, but instead of it just being this total, a bunch of lawless Australians, we drop in, a peacekeeping force, and we're just there rebuilding, a nation. And that's really a lot of what it was. And it's, to have witnessed that and seen it was, I think, a really unique experience. And the majority of my time during the initial invasion, once again, like I tell people, don't get it twisted. It was not like we were just like in just open, grueling warfare, but it was a different kind of hard and a different kind of experience.
Yeah.
And I think it was like, it was really transformative for me. And I tell people all the time, at the end of the day, we were in the officers club in central Baghdad. That's what my unit had occupied. I was on the 3rd floor, and I was looking out over the Tigris River, and I could see just buildings. The skyline of Baghdad at that time was just pockmarked with huge holes punched through buildings from cruise missiles, and the place was just on fire for months. And I just used to go to bed with the soft glow of fire on the horizon from where we had destroyed the entire city, and it was just bananas to think about. But it was a formative experience. So you get through the initial invasion, and like, listen, like by every measurable mean, like you were like a rock star, West Point guy, played football, field artillery guy with a Ranger tab, spent the first bit of your career in Korea, like getting real. That was like the only place for real training, prior to the war.
Yeah,
the big one, one of them at least, and get to tag along with the 101st, who at that point had experience also in Afghanistan, so they had real wartime experience. Going to the initial invasion into Iraq, and at some point you figure out that you're going to join the Special Forces. You had volunteered for a lot of stuff at this time. How did you find your way into the Special Forces?
When you graduate from West Point, you have a 5-year commitment.
Yep.
And so for us, my year group, we didn't have a whole lot of time to really contemplate what we would do next.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? As previous classes did, because we were at war.
Yeah.
We were legitimately fighting, doing things out there. And so we got back, and decision time.
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to do? And so I kind of saw a lot of my classmates leaving or getting ready to leave or wanting to leave. And it's like, what are you going to do? Oh, my dad got me a job, and here or there, I'm going to Wall Street. I'm doing finance. I'm doing banking. I'm doing things like that. I had no connections with any of that stuff. I didn't know anything about it. Medical sales, device sales. A lot of my buddies went and did that. And I was like, you know what? I have a different path.
Yeah.
What is that path? I don't know yet. And I also felt a little bit like I haven't grown up enough yet.
Sure.
How
old were you at the time?
Oh gosh, 25 maybe. 25.
Oh yeah. So you were young.
At least I thought I was young. It just a lot of us, you get into entrepreneurship, it's because you never really truly figured out what you want to do with yourself in life. A lot of times.
Yeah.
And so another friend of mine from West Point, a linebacker, Jesse, he's like, Jay, man, I want to go Special Forces, dude. I want to try out for the Green Berets. And I was like, yeah, man. I was like, those guys that's a different level, man.
Yeah.
And I saw those guys in Iraq doing things like, man, those guys can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
Wear whatever uniforms they want, put beards on, hands in pockets, like it doesn't matter, and then they got stuff done. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And so I always looked up to him and respected him. I never thought I'm going to be one of them until my buddy Jesse was like, let's try out
Yeah.
together. Me and you, man. Come on, friends. Be running and gunning. It'll be like old times because we haven't seen each other in person for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, dude. All right. I'm in. I'm gonna put in my packet and we'll do this. And we both put in our packets, and mine was selected and Jesse's was not.
Damn it.
So it was kind of like the same thing with
You
Ranger
got your
School,
friends
right?
just roping you into all this crazy
I
shit.
get roped in, and then
Yeah.
I'm left hanging. So I found myself going to Fort Bragg, Camp McCall,
Yeah.
on a bus with a bunch of strangers,
Yeah.
thinking to myself, what the hell am I doing? Like,
Yeah.
what did I get myself into? And, you get off the bus and you're immediately doing log PT.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like,
Having a bad time.
let's do this. And I found myself loving selection. I was like, I was in phenomenal shape, probably best shape of my life.
Yep.
Was crushing the test, the 2-mile runs, the 8-mile runs, the push-ups, sit-ups, the pull-ups, like all that stuff. I was like, man, I'm impressing myself. Came in second in the ruck march,
The last one?
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
And I was just like, I'm not a ruck guy, and so all that was great. And for the officers, they do some psychological testing and
Yeah.
some scenarios that they put you through. And I fell in love with it. And I was like, man, I think this is for me. The STAR land nav course crushed it, and I decided to go that route. So that's what I did.
So you get through selection, you did well at selection, and you find yourself on team. Tell me, what was it like being on team, and what was your experience like in the Special Forces? Did you deploy again, this kind of stuff?
Yeah. I got to 10 Special Forces Group.
Yep.
And I got to a battalion in a company that were just about ready to deploy to Iraq.
Yeah.
And went to my company commander, who actually turned out to be a general later on in his career, just brilliant guy, Isaac Peltier. And he was like, Jason, we have 15 ODAs, Operational Detachment Alphas, slated to go to Iraq. You're the 16th. You're not going to go. You're a brand new captain to this team. We don't know what you can do, what you're capable of, and we're only a few weeks out. So what am I going to do? Am I going to argue? What am I going to do?
Yeah.
So, yes, sir. Okay. Here's your team, Jason, sort of thing. And my team was like, if you're worth anything, sir, you're going to get us to go to Iraq, or you're a piece of, whatever.
You're like, I just got here, dude.
Well, my name is Jason, by the way, and they're just looking
Nice to
down at
meet
me
you.
already.
Yeah,
It's weird. Some of the teams, and like they look down on officers immediately. And some of them really like, hey, listen, we're a 10-2 team, but if we get a good officer, we're going to be, 12-0, 13-0,
Yeah.
and they, sort of ignored me at first and tried to get me to earn my stripes. And the first thing they did was like, we're not staying around in garrison, we're going to Iraq. So figure it out.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like, figure it out, let me help you. It was like, figure it out, I'm going to go to the bar and drink.
Yeah. Let me
Let
know
how it goes.
Let me know how it goes.
And so I was like, all right, well, I want to impress these guys. I want to do something. So I did some research, and I found out that there was an area that the group wasn't going to.
Yeah.
And conventional forces haven't been to this area in like 4 years or 3 years. And I was like, man, I wonder if, and there used to be a base there, a FOB there. And I thought there could be an opportunity for us to go there. And so I did a bunch of research, and I found all this stuff out, and I went over the head of my company commander and went right to my battalion commander, which he did not appreciate,
I bet, yeah.
And I was like, hey, sir, we really want to go to Iraq, and here's why. I gave him this presentation, and this is where we're going to go, and all this stuff. And he was like, hey, Jason, I like the initiative, and I'm going to say yes. So congratulations, you got your team to go to Iraq, but instead of being with Alpha Company, we're going to attach you to Charlie Company.
Okay.
And so I was like, all right, sir, let me tell the team, and so I told them, and was hoping that the reaction would be much more appreciative.
Applause, right?
that.
Thank you. Yeah.
It was more like, that's what we expected you to do. It's like, you assholes. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, thanks, guys.
And so the first deployment as a commander there was to central Iraq in the Sadia Jalula areas where I went.
Yeah. Nice. So time on team goes well. You had a pretty formative experience. I know it can be tough for officers, right? Because, guys on teams sometimes will be there for 9, 10, 12, 15 years, just on a team for 15 years. But officers, you guys, for everybody that doesn't know, you guys have a timeline, right? And you're only going to spend so much time on team. And then you got to move on to the next thing. And there's potential for you to swing back to special forces. But your team time comes to a close, right? And you're probably at this next decision point for yourself, right? Tell me about that.
Well, my journey was a little weird, a little different. So the last thing I did as a commander was we went to Mali, Africa on a JSET, Joint Command and Exchange Training, and we were there for a month or so. And for whatever reason, I got sick. And there are a lot of diseases and parasites and crazy things in Africa.
Oh yeah.
The last team that we replaced, 2 guys got spinal meningitis. It was just crazy, And we were out in the woods, literally the jungle, and we were attached to the force there. They were called the ETIA, Echelon Tactique Interarmée. And they were a French unit. Well, they were a Malian unit. They spoke French, and we were embedded with this tribe, and it was like straight out of National Geographic, jungle skirts and, breasts hanging out and, spears, the whole thing. So it was kind of interesting. And I got sick. I got real sick. And my medic, Tim, he was like, "Hey man, I'm worried about you. There's some stuff out here." And he gave me a bunch of medicine, and I just kind of hallucinating, throwing up, and just my head was pounding. He's like, "I want to take you back to the embassy just in case, we don't know, man,
Yeah.
And so we went back to the embassy, and they looked at me, and I had a good night's sleep, and they didn't see anything wrong with me. So I was okay. So we went back to the team, and we finished up the deployment there. And I got back home, and the night I got home, I had a seizure, a tonic-clonic seizure. And my girlfriend at the time picked me up at the airport. We went out with some friends, and then we went back to my house. And I woke up in the middle of the night, and my girlfriend was bawling her eyes out in the corner of the room. There were police, firemen, paramedics surrounding my bed. There must have been like 10 people in my house.
Yeah.
And I woke up, and they were like, looking at me. I was like, "What the hell are you guys doing here? Like, what's going on?" They're like, "Hey man, you had a seizure." I'm like, "What?" And I saw my girlfriend crying. I was like, "Okay, well, something happened,
Yeah.
And my tongue, I had bit my tongue almost off, like it was bleeding really bad, and my whole body was really sore. And they're like, "We're gonna ask you some questions. Like, what's your name?" I'm like, "Jason." "Okay. Where do you live?" "My house." "What state do you live in?" And the information just wasn't there.
Yeah.
I felt like I was fine, but I was searching for an answer. I was like, I don't know.
You're like, I'm
I'm
not
like,
super sure, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
When's the last time you were in Africa? And I'd gotten home that night or the night before, right? I was like, "I've never been to Africa." They're like, "Okay, all right, we're gonna take you to the hospital."
Yeah.
And so they did that. And the next day they asked me some questions. I knew all the answers at that point. And I went to, back to base, and I told my medic there, it was a great guy, doc. And he was like, "Well, I'm not sure what's going on, but we're just going to monitor you and make sure everything's okay." And every few months or so, I'd have another real bad one. And at first my unit was like, "Hey man, we're just going to take care of you and figure out." And eventually they were like, "Jason, man, like, listen, you can't deploy like this. You can't jump out of airplanes like this. You can't fire a gun like this." But like, "Hell man, you can't even drive to work like this.
Yeah.
We got to figure out." So I started going to a neurology clinic up in Denver. And then eventually went to North Carolina to get looked at.
Yeah.
And they told me at my last appointment with the clinic, they were like, "Listen, here's what we can do. We can go put electrodes on your head, and we'll induce a seizure. So then we'll know where the seizure is occurring in your brain."
Yeah.
I was like, "Okay." And I'm like, "Then what?" "Well, then intrusively, we're going to go in and cut off that piece of your brain where the seizure is occurring. And then hopefully that'll stop it." And I was like, "You're going to cut out my brain?"
Yeah.
They're like, "Yeah." "Will that affect me in any way? Like, will I become a vegetable?" Like, "We don't know. Maybe. Hopefully it doesn't." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not going to do that. Like,
Yeah.
I'm good. I'll just deal with it." And so, just taking medicine and living a healthier life and doing things like that, I've been able to bring them down and manage them. So
Yeah.
everything's good.
I can commiserate, right? And I've both personally, and I know a lot of guys in the military, guys that like fought long and hard through the global war on terror, guys that went on arduous deployments and, spent their entire adult lives either like at war or just training for war, right? We sacrificed a large portion of our lives, when we were young, right? When it matters, to do that. And I know it's painful, right? For somebody to look you in the face and tell you that you can't lead men with guns anymore. You know what I mean? Because for a long time, I know for me, that's all I wanted to do. That's all I wanted. I felt like that's where I belonged. That's who I was. But I also think what's important to know is the fact of the matter is for that specific profession to lead men with guns, young men with guns on behalf of your nation, it's not a matter of if it's going to end, which is when and how. When and how, right? So obviously your exit from the military wasn't what you wanted. Probably not on the terms that you wanted. I would submit it never really is though. But so you find yourself on the back end of a pretty illustrious military career. Obviously through no fault of your own. You're finding your way out of the army. What do you do next? What a sudden and difficult transition, right? To just be told you got to get out. So what do you do with yourself now?
That's the question that I strive to answer. We
Yeah.
all ask ourselves, now what?
Yeah.
What am I going to do with myself? For a lot of guys, it's I'm going to get a job.
Yeah.
And that's the same crossroads that I found myself upon in 5 years into the military. Like, do I get a job or do I stay in? What do I do?
Yeah.
In this case, it was, something my mother used to tell me when I was younger. She used to say, show me your friends and I'll show you your future, And so what that meant at the time was, hey, if you want to be a starter on the team, hang out with the starters. If you want to be successful, hang out with successful people. If you want to be a loser, hang out with those, the guys playing video games and not going outside,
Yeah.
You decide. And so I said, who in my network, who do I know that are my friends that are doing something that I want to emulate? And so I looked at some of my buddies that had started businesses and they were doing really well. They were excited. They were making money. They were being creative, and it was stressful. And it was a chance to, in a way, be like a Green Beret again, like
Yeah.
in charge of a team. Whether or not it succeeds or fails is completely on your shoulders, And I thought to myself, I want to be a business person. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to do that. What do I do? Hell if I know. I don't know. I got my MBA at BYU, and during that process, they give you an opportunity to do a pitch competition.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, what am I good at? What do I know? I was like, well, it's West Point, Ranger, Green Beret, and my whole life, that's what I've done. I guess I know a lot about leadership, and I care a lot about my friends, and I'm pretty interested in sports. How can I combine all those things together? And so I created a company called Mission Essential at the time. It was a leadership development company. And it's not the most innovative or creative. You're teaching leadership right after you get out of the military.
Yeah.
But I was lucky enough to land a contract with the New York Jets, and I brought all my buddies, Casey being one of them, guys that are Green Berets or Navy SEALs or Medal of Honor guys, together. And I also brought in other veterans that I served with or that I knew about. Tommy Parker was one of those guys.
Yeah.
And I combined those experiences with science. So I brought in researchers, experts, PhDs, and I said, if we can combine the art and the science together, we can offer something valuable for our clients. And so that took off pretty quickly. And we started working with all these NFL teams. And then we started working with some Major League Baseball teams, and that opened up to some corporate clients. And what we teach is getting comfortable, being uncomfortable. We call it deliberate discomfort.
That's right.
And that's what I did, And as we were teaching one of these NFL teams, it was the Oakland Raiders. We had the big contract with them. It was a season-long deal, and it was over. This contract was over, and we're just letting our hair down, so to speak, kicking our feet up and relaxing. And as an officer, you're sort of, it's been ingrained in you to make sure your guys are taken care of. And so I was kind of going around like, hey, how's everything going? Can I do anything for you? That sort of thing. And I got a bunch of guys together that were mostly wounded guys. Tommy was in this group, and one of the guys said, well, Jason, we get a large disability check from the government, and there's charities that take us hunting and fishing. And my response was, oh, cool, man, that's great. Like, I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah.
And that same individual was like, well, Jason, it's not that great. I'll tell you what, like, We go hunting, we go fishing, we have a great time. We come back home, nothing's changed for us. I was like, huh. And another guy spoke up and he's like, yeah, man, what it comes down to is this, man, we had a purpose in the military. Now I don't have one. And another guy said, well, Jason, what'd you do to find your purpose again when you left the military? You know, we know about your seizures and all that. And nobody really asked me that before. And I
Yeah.
was like, purpose again, man. I said, well, guys, I guess it's starting this business. You know, it gives me a chance to bring you guys back out on a team, to hang out with you guys, to be creative, to be in charge of something, to lead something special, to add value to the clients, to give them something they can use so they can improve themselves. It gives me a chance to make money for the company, make money for my family. This is my purpose.
Yeah.
And guys were like, well, Jason, we want to feel that same way too.
Did you recognize that some of your formative experience in the military had prepared you or made it, given you some tools that made you particularly prepared to start your own business?
Unconventional warfare.
Yeah.
You know, expect the unexpected, you know, be resourceful and determined. So number one, I think in my career is like, listen, you just don't quit.
Yeah.
Times get tough, you know, just keep moving forward. That's probably the best thing for business. The second is being resourceful.
Yeah.
Somebody closed the door in your face, or somebody told you no, or you're not getting a response from somebody, figure it out. You know, figure it out. I never was a guy where somebody gave me a task and my response was, well, I sent an email. Well, my boss didn't tell me to send an email. My boss told me to get it done.
Yeah.
I'm going to get it done.
So you've transitioned from the military. You've gotten a great education, right? You got an MBA. You have figured out a way to take a structured approach to business, and you leverage all that and your experience. This great experience in the military, really formative. Lucky that we were in the military at the time that we were.
Yeah.
But you did something special, and you took this combination of your experience and this education, and you weaponized that to create a great business for yourself. But you saw this gap, right, that was in the veteran community, and you were like, hey, how do I do something for these guys?
Yeah.
And that's where Warrior Rising came from.
Yeah. This experience, this conversation, or these conversations, those were the catalyst to begin
Yeah.
Warrior Rising. So talking with these guys and about purpose, and I said it was business for me. You know, Tommy was there and he's like, you know, I had a handicap accessible home built for me in Montana, and you know, I never asked for it, never wanted it. I came home 19 years old, triple amputee Marine, and everyone called me a hero. Didn't feel like a hero. They didn't ask me if I wanted this home. They built it for me. I don't like the feeling associated with this house because I feel like I haven't earned it. You know, so I sit outside and I smoke weed all day long because I don't want to go inside. And then Tommy, obviously, you know, if you know his story, turned to harder drugs and eventually went up to prison, and the home was taken away from him,
Yeah.
you know, altogether. And so to backtrack to this story, you know, guys, when I told them that my purpose was business, they said, well, you know, we want to have that same feeling too. We want to start businesses. And I was like, well, great. First you have to have an idea.
Yeah.
And guys were like, we have ideas. And I was like, let me hear them. And we went around talking about their ideas. And I was blunt with them, you know, because I think if you're in the military, you can be candid with your community.
That's the way we talk to each other.
You know, the civilian populace, they take a different approach. They don't want to offend. They don't want to
Sure.
step on toes, which I understand. And so most of the ideas that I heard from these guys were terrible, like the worst business ideas ever, right?
Yeah.
If you've ever been in business, you kind of understand this.
Yeah.
And I told them, I was like, guys, don't do that. And they're like, why not? I said, because it's, you know, this, that, and the other thing. And they would thank me. And some of the ideas were good. And I was like, you should do that. And here's how you can do it. And some people you can talk to or whatever, some things you want to look at. And one of the guys came up to me and was like, hey, Jason, here's the deal, man. You're going to move to Tampa with me. You know, you're going to be my COO. You know, we're going to do this and that. And I was like, well, let's pump the brakes, man.
Yeah.
You know, like, I'm not going to give you any money unless you show me your business plan. And then he's like, what are you talking about? Like, you got to show me, you know, we got to put an operating, you know, agreement together. We pro forma, SWOT analysis. You know, I started going through all this stuff, and he was like, what are you talking about, man? Like, just, did you do that? I was like, yeah. And they're like, well, just give me your stuff. I'll copy it. We're good. You know, like, it doesn't work like that. You know what I mean? You can't do it. You got to do your own.
Got to put in that sweat equity.
And they were like, well, how do I do that? And I was like, man, listen, do I have to get an MBA? I was like, you don't have to get an MBA. Just, you know, there's material out there. Just Google some stuff, figure it out. You'll be fine. And I sort of ended the conversation like that. I don't know why I cut it so short, but we ended up, you know, hanging out. We all partied and celebrated the rest of the night. We had a great time. And I went back home and I started thinking about that conversation and all these conversations for months. And I was like, man, these guys are really coming to me, asking me for help, and it wasn't for something like, give me money. It was, I want to start something.
Yeah.
I want to do something for myself. Can you help me do this? And I was like, that's the most, that's the ultimate form of altruism.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's what charity really is. And the more I thought about it, I said, I'm in a position to do something about it. So I will. I'll start a charity. Did I know what I was doing? Hell no. I had no idea. I've never started a charity before, and sort of haphazardly started Warrior Rising. And I got together with Joe Hilton, a guy who's a civilian, but phenomenal patriot. And I met him at the MBA program, and Joe Hilton and Ryan Miller and I started Warrior Rising together. And the first year we helped 6 veterans, and I was the coach, fundraiser. I did everything.
Yep.
And 9 years later, last year, we helped over 21,000 veterans altogether.
So over 21,000 veterans altogether. And of course, and you started this all the way back in 2014. Since then, you've had more than a dozen national business showers. Business showers, of course, are an opportunity where individuals that have participated in the programs have a chance to come and pitch their brands, their business ideas, their dreams, their hopes in front of industry experts, people that work in their field, their category. And they get opportunities for access to grants, and then, of course, continued mentorship and coaching. Warrior Rising, in my opinion, and obviously I'm close to it, right? Like,
Yeah,
been
you could say.
I've been working with you for a little over 2 years now. And what's interesting is what started for me, when you guys first brought me on, is this was not my main effort. I had, as I was working on a lot of different stuff for brand management, helping start a couple other brands, but I really have enjoyed working with Warrior Rising, and I find this to be the most substantive and impactful work that I do now, for the same reasons that you talked about. I think the business stuff, for me, it's not easy. It's not easy by any means, but conceptually, I get it. I get what it takes, and I understand what's required. And having put in some reps, help launch brands, help launch large brands, and help build brands from the ground up, and to include just the goofy lifestyle business that I own back in Tampa. But which of course is in a lot of ways a big anchor for me, both personally and professionally. But being able to share my experiences, with veterans, and being able to do it in a charitable way, and something that you said a while back stuck with me, is like, we're not here giving people a handout. We're giving them a hand up, and I think that's important. And I think that's the kind of charity that people want. And you've created this organization, and surrounded yourself with people that are dedicated, to help veterans find purpose, and I think start like the next great generation of American business owners. So, I'm curious. You've built this fantastic organization. You've almost been running for a decade strong now. What do you see for Warrior Rising over the horizon? What are your aspirations for Warrior Rising as it continues to grow?
That's a great question. So part of me has that strategic plan, like, this is what I want to accomplish. And another part of me wants to see where we could grow organically.
Yeah.
Where do the winds take us, so to speak. So the first thing is hiring the right people for the team, setting the right culture, getting the right people there. And I think we finally got to that spot.
Yeah.
You being such an integral member of the team, and having people that generally like each other, respect each other, and that are professional, and then get paid, because when you bring volunteers in the organization, you can't really hold them accountable for anything. You hope that they do a good job, but what can you do if they don't? Nothing. They're volunteer. So that's sort of the natural progression of starting a nonprofit, is going away from the volunteer work and hiring folks.
Yeah.
Right?
Eventually it gets big enough to where it operates not too dissimilar from a business.
That's right.
Just like a normal old business.
That's right.
Yeah.
The next for us is, we want to make sure that we're actually serving the veteran.
Yeah.
A lot of nonprofits are like, hey, listen, we raised $20 million, but 15 million of that went to administrative costs and other things, and only 5 million went to the veteran. We want over 80% of every dollar raised to go back to the veteran, which we've been able to achieve every year.
Amen.
And we want to continue doing that. The next is, to be innovative and valuable. So a lot of nonprofits, they think that they have good intentions and they think they're doing the right thing, but what they fail to do is the market research. They fail to actually ask the veteran,
Yeah.
do you want this? For example, in the Tommy Parker situation, do you want a house?
Yeah.
Before I start to build a $500,000 house for you, do you actually want it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
he didn't. He wanted a job,
and,
right?
and people fail to ask those simple questions, you
Yeah.
know? And so for us, it's about, what does the veteran want in the business world? Well, they want education, they want training, they want to be able to network, and eventually they want money. Now, the novice business owners right away, they're like, give me money. And it's just like, no, we're not going to do that. First, you have to prove yourself and you have to earn it. And when we put the journey in front of them, a lot of them, similar to like going to Ranger School or the Q course, oh man, I can't do that. That's way too hard.
Yeah.
Well, shoot, man, if that's too hard for you, then there's no way you're going to be able to start a business. You know what I mean? Like, if the training is too hard for you, then you're not going to survive combat. And so we got to make sure that they earn this and they respect it, and their skin in the game, sweat equity. The next is to find out what else we can do to supplement their training. We have coaching calls, master classes that we have. And then we have the business shower idea, where we provide the veterans that attend everything they could possibly need to succeed in business. And as a nonprofit, a big thing is making sure that we can raise money. We get the right donors here that care. They don't want to just take the veterans to make them clients of their business. We got to make sure we have the right donors and supporters and sponsors here that really want to support these vets. So what I'd like to do is get to first, to become a $10 million a year organization, which I think we're pretty close. And then from there, I think it'd be, an ambitious goal is to get to 20 million, and then sort of sustain that over time. Certainly want to help more veterans, bring more veterans to more business showers, want to open up more locations. Instead of having 4 business showers a year, maybe we have 6.
Yeah.
Maybe it turns into 12 if we have enough staff members to support that.
Yeah.
I don't want to overwhelm or overburden the staff members either, because I want them to continue to feel like this is a soul enriching experience. Like, I love being here. I want to help. I'm doing a good thing here, and I know I'm doing a good thing because I see it.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that's important to recognize is anytime you start a business, it's always because it's something that's you're passionate about.
Yeah.
But like, that passion turns into work quick, right? And like the place that you walk into that looks like a playground will look like an office not too soon thereafter. So it's, but I will say this, most days when I'm working with Warrior Rising, it's more passion, less work. And I know yourself and the rest of the staff have worked hard to ensure that that's the case. And you've continued to add tremendous value. Your program staff, Preston and Teresa, have done a great job towards enlisting the help of both the Michigan Veteran Trust, where we're opening up a ton of new opportunities inside Michigan State, to include pairing up with Grand Valley State University, who had a Veteran Entrepreneur Accelerator program, who are now going to be leading up like kind of our next series of master classes starting in May. And then, of course, tons and tons of opportunities over the horizon, upcoming business showers, our Total Archery Challenge events, where you can see both Tommy and Dara Parker out leading the way for that. So you've got so many great things going on for the organization. And I know all the things that you're talking about in terms of dreams and aspirations for the nonprofit aren't just, it's just a matter of not if, but when, right? So would love to, I ask all of our guests this, and you're no different in that regard. What's something that you're reading, maybe something you're listening to? It could even be a movie you've watched. It's been a tremendous source of inspiration in terms of your entrepreneurial journey, something that you would recommend to somebody else.
Well, the movie I want to see more than anything right now is Dune 2.
God, I could talk. We could do a whole nother podcast just about Dune 2.
We could do
God
that,
dang
man.
it. Yeah. Okay.
I've heard great things from you and from everybody else.
Yeah, boy, I
And,
can't stop talking about it.
My wife wants to see it with me, so we got to wait till we have some time to watch it. So
There you go.
I'm excited about that. The last book I read was Frankenstein by Mary Shelley.
Okay.
And it's wildly different than any movie you've ever seen or you've heard about it. It was an amazing, amazing book. Couldn't put it down. And the book I'm reading right now is Alexander the Great. It's a huge
Which one?
tome. It's I think there's like 1,200 pages in it.
Oh man, I've read a lot of historical fiction about Alexander the Great, Macedonians, and all that kind of stuff. We could have a whole separate podcast about that too. Dang.
And I love the classics, and
Yeah.
I love history. Gosh, as far as business books go, the Lean Startup, Good to Great. Those are two books that really shaped my
Good to Great killer.
my mindset. Going to get my MBA, business school and all that.
Yeah.
And you got to be careful about reading what's the latest trend, because there are books, material that you can read that it's no longer relevant. They're outdated. You know what I mean? And so I got my MBA, I graduated in 2013. That was, 11 years ago, surprisingly, shockingly. Going to get my MBA now would be wildly different than my experience 11 years ago.
Yeah. And listen, trends by definition are ephemeral in nature. So it's temporary. So it's like, hey, be mindful of it,
So I always try to stay on top of things like, hey, listen, this is what I learned 11 years ago, and that was the latest and greatest. And that is no longer relevant. Forget whatever you learned back then, because this is what's new now. Just like social media, they change the algorithms all the time. And they do all these different things. It's like, how am I going to stay on top of this? So yeah, I just leave you with that.
Well, good segue into my second question. This is also what we ask everybody who's a guest is, if you could give one piece of advice, maybe two, right? If you need to somebody who's getting ready to start their entrepreneurial journey, or even moreover, if you could go back about 5 years, and you've had a lot of crossroads that sound like important crossroads in your career. Seems to be the theme for you, as a matter of fact, is you consistently get put at a crossroad where you have to make very important decisions.
Yeah, I guess so.
But as you were getting ready to, kind of embark on your entrepreneurial journey, or if you were to give somebody else a piece of advice, what's a good piece of advice you would leave with somebody who wants to become an entrepreneur?
Man,
something you wish you had known back in the day.
There's so much. And
I know.
I'll try to answer that question as though I'm giving myself this advice. One, it's not impossible. Like, you can do it, and many people have done it before. Two, you can't do it alone. You need to find somebody or people that you trust that want to join this journey with you, but you also have to be very clear and manage and set those expectations up front.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because if you're not clear up front, in your mind it might be clear, but if you haven't articulated that, they won't know.
They can't read your mind,
and they'll go sideways,
Yeah.
or they'll go in a different direction, or what. So that, and first off, you gotta have a product that, I wouldn't say easy to get clients, but you need to get clients.
Yeah.
That's what it all comes down to.
You have to add value, right, to consumers.
Can you add value? Can you find clients? And if you have a product that nobody understands, that nobody wants to buy, you got nothing.
Yeah.
Also, if it's something that you enjoy doing and nobody wants to buy it, it's just a hobby, and it's an expensive hobby. Business it's pretty simple. You have something that somebody else wants, and you're able to sell it to that person.
Yeah.
For an exchange of something.
Yeah.
Right. And if you don't have that, you're just messing around, you're wasting time.
Yeah. Economics 101. Well, I really appreciate your time this afternoon. I'm excited for the next 48 hours. We're going to have a great time seeing some of these veteran entrepreneurs have an opportunity to really show everybody what they have in mind, what their passion is, and how they want to start the next great American business. If people want to learn more about you, Jason, what's a great way that people can look you up, find you on social media? What's your medium of choice if somebody wants to reach out, learn more about you, or learn more about Warrior Rising?
The social media platform I use the most is LinkedIn. So
Hell
you
yeah.
can find me on LinkedIn, just Jason Van Camp. You find me there. And post every so often. I post a lot during the Deliberate Discomfort Challenge that we do every year.
Of course.
So yeah, find me on LinkedIn. Hit me up via LinkedIn message, and I'll eventually get to you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And of course, if you want to learn more about Warrior Rising and our programs, you can reach out to us at programs@warriorrising.com, or you, of course, can go to warriorrising.org. to learn more about our programs, learn more about Warrior Rising and all the great things that we're doing for veteran entrepreneurs that are transitioning. And don't forget, we also help out military spouses and family members of those same veterans. Jason, I can't thank you enough for being on today and sharing your story. It's absolutely fantastic. Like I said, you've got an incredible background, and there's nobody that's more fit to kind of lead this ship in the right direction than you. And it's been an absolute pleasure to work with you, and it's been a pleasure to listen to this story, and I can't wait for everybody to hear it as well.
Pleasure's all mine. Thanks, Ben.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
those kind words, man.
Yeah, of course.
Great job.